Good morning and welcome to Deep Dives with New Perspectives. Hello, Merrylin. How are you today?
Hi, Michael. I'm pretty bouncy, as you just saw. Yeah, it's a good day. It's a good day. Maybe we'll have some snow tonight. It'll be nice to get a little moisture. We need it. I think probably huge portions of the earth need it. We're not so fortunate to get much rain or snow these days, it seems.
Yeah, we have some powerful brothers lining up this week, don't we?
Yes, we do.
We're making some activity, I should say.
We have a lot of activity zeroing in on the area of Capricorn. You know, Pluto has been going through that sign for a few years now, and obviously one of the biggest issues there, at least from my perspective, are the major shifts and changes and ups and downs in our country, because that Pluto this spring is about to return to the exact degree and minutes that it was on at the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And and we've seen, I think, some of the stuff that Pluto does, because for me, Pluto is basically about really, you know, if we're not doing the evolution that we've come here to do as humans, all humans are here for some kind of evolutionary process, some process of having certain experiences that help us to broaden or enlarge or expand our consciousness about, you know, behaviors regarding certain kinds of issues, etc. For the United States, it's issues around organization, so about authority. I mean, we started this year or last year. It seems like time is in a warp for me. We started last year with an insurrection in this country, and you know, you kind of wonder. I mean, there's some thoughts about this area of the United States Declaration chart is about its values and its money, its resources, its natural resources. And I guess that insurrection was a lot about values, in terms of, you know, what do you think is, just starting with, what do you think is proper behavior in public? And we can go on up the ladder from there. But also what's happening along with that Pluto having been there now for years. Yesterday, Mars moved in to the sign of Capricorn, and it will meet up soon with Pluto. And Mercury, which is still retrograde, has gone into Capricorn and also will meet up with that Pluto before Mars does, actually. So there we go with a lot of energy.
It's funny when you say that, it makes me think of it. You know, I always think of Mars and Pluto together as like Mars declares war and Pluto finalizes it. And so I'm thinking, you know, here's Pluto at the end of Capricorn and here's Mars just coming in. It's like this long fuse in a sense, right? And look what's going on right now with Ukraine and Russia and NATO and United States, and we're, you know, all this posturing that's going on, right? Because it's, you know, that's an aspect of Capricorn, you know, a show of power, especially with Mars and Pluto involved here, right? And communication isn't going to be they're going to try and solve it diplomatically. How are they going to do that with Mercury retrograde?
I don't think so. I have a Mercury retrograde story. The company that saves, you know, and puts up the podcasts that we do on KSFR, and, you know, my Moonwise show is podcast. They have gone through a major restructuring of how we put those podcasts into their system and then how people get them. And at the end of last week, certain shows, including mine, including Moonwise, the podcasts were not accessible. And basically, I was just told to wait, be patient. And yesterday they were wonderful. But I thought, oh, an information technology company restructuring. Well, that's a restructuring, could be a Mercury retrograde, but it's a communication company. It doesn't, it was a little bizarre, I must say. And of course, people were emailing and saying, can't get your podcasts. What's happening? And I'm going to be patient.
Right.
It'll come back.
Mercury retrograde after all.
And it did.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a building up to this, because the first, I mean, we're obviously in that period. When we think about what was going on in the United States just before the signing of Declaration of Independence, it was not a pretty time. And the signing of the Declaration didn't automatically make that period end either. I mean, this, it took a little while to acknowledge the sovereignty, the individuation of the United States from England. And so, this whole period is, I mean, that's what it is in a way. Everyone's kind of trying to define themselves. What are our values? What do we want to seek? What do we want to promote? Our country has become very, very fascist, right? I mean, with the lobbyists we have talking to, and the way our government's now running, these individuals are more interested in what corporations, especially after Citizens United got, accepted as viable.
Well, you just said kind of the country's kind of getting fascist. And what flew into my mind the moment you said that was, one could consider our founding fathers as fascists.
Mhm.
And there's something about, Capricorn representing the status quo, but it's also looking for genuineness. There's a sense of they don't want something that isn't real.
Quality.
The quality. Well, it's not just quality. It's like, are you really phony? Is this a sham you're presenting? And
Well,
so
it's the final Earth, right? So it's like all those aspects of Earth combined, and understanding the synthesis of what it means to be handling resources, managing one's own resources, other people's resources, how to be able to control things on a much larger level, right? I mean, that's why we say it rules corporations. So it's these large, and that's kind of what our countries have kind of become, right? They're kind of becoming these multinational corporations.
Well, yeah, to follow the point that I was going to, because I really want to get to that point,
Yeah, sorry.
Is our founding fathers, were slave owners for the most part. I'm not every single one of them, but a good chunk of them were. I don't even have any statistics on that. But for them to look at the economy of the country, they obviously did not have a sense at that particular time in history of what was possible for them. The people that had preceded them in settling in the country, because Europeans had been coming over for over a century to the United States. And so for them, it was like being honest with themselves that we need to keep this economy going with the slave labor. So in some sense, that was not a sham for them, yet it was kind of a fascist reality, which is what we see today with our corporations and their structures, is just, we want to control the market. I mean, I remember reading something not too long ago, maybe a year or two, time has shrunk that much with COVID, where Bezos not only has wanted to expand his market, but he also wants to be the market. And that is, in this case, Bezo being true in a Capricornian sense to his inner thoughts. He's presenting us a true image of himself. It's not a phony image. This is not a pretty side of Capricorn, but to me, it is reflective of how people think. Now, nowadays, there are many of us that go, this system, this capitalist system, is no longer working. And I'm one of those, we are saying that the part inside of me that's honest and true and has that integrity can no longer support that system, because I'm living a lie if I do that.
Well, it's also this thing, I think, that we're gradually, I wonder, I mean, I think it's very easy for us to look on the past and superimpose our current ideas and thoughts onto the past and what they thought and how they manage these all. I mean, I don't know how those individuals resolve those issues within their consciousness. Some of them, like Jefferson, I know upon their death released the slaves, which is kind of hypocritical, I think, in a sense, like, if you really meant it. And I know some that did it during their lifetime. But the bottom line is, I think there's a certain amount of, like one of my sayings is, we don't know who discovered water, but we know it wasn't fish. Like, when you're in it, do you realize? And I think that's what I see this whole period of time, like from the 1980s on, of this, actually from the 1960s. I mean, I was born in the 60s, so it's hard for me to be aware of what was really going on. But I mean, reading in history and everything, it's this gradual awakening to the stench we've been soaking ourselves in.
Well,
The
that's
sexism, the racism, the is there a word for religiousism? What do you call it when it's the ways that religion? I mean, there's been more bloodshed because of religion over the history of human. I mean, that even goes beyond us. I mean, so this human ideology of thinking that certain things are worth fighting for, it's like we're again at this time, like, okay, what are we wanting to fight for? January 6th last year showed us there's a significant number of people in our country right now who are willing to risk all those things, like what you said a moment ago, of like, doing the right thing, being good. They're willing to risk that for whatever they're believing in right now. And what some of these people are believing is not aligned with what the reality is, because as we know, when there's a big change that happens, people are stuck in that old way of believing. And a lot of people don't like change, especially the fixed signs.
Well, basically what you're saying is a lot of people do not self-examine their thought processes and the assumptions behind them.
There's no critical thought.
That's a very Jupiterian process, actually.
Critical thought's been removed from our schooling over the last 30 years.
That's what I've heard. I've not been involved in the schooling since the 80s.
All I can do is looking at how the world is out there. I don't see any critical thinking going on. So I don't think children are being raised with the idea of like, hey, you know what? There are consequences to your actions. These are the things you work towards.
Well, that's probably true in some systems. I can't make a gross generalization about that. But back to what you were saying, going back to the 60s, I mean, that was with Uranus-Pluto conjunction. It's the last Uranus-Pluto, which was a kind of and you said these words, I mean, an awakening to deeper purpose, to, what are we really here for? What is this all about? And in my view, and this is astrology is really fed a lot into this, is we're here as humans to evolve, to grow and awaken to other realities, and somehow or other that growth has taken place in a very narrow area, which has to do with the physical world and with money, with profit, with commerce. And
At all costs.
huh?
At all cost.
Yes, at all costs. And Capricorn, those last signs are about collective energy. And Capricorn really shows us the structures, and the structure that has been dominant for us in this country has been capitalism. I mean, and it's interesting when you brought up, the conflict right now about what are the Russians doing outside of Ukraine, et cetera. And yet, back in the mid 1800s with Marx in his writings, and oh gosh, the name of them, I'm thinking of Lenin and Stalin and Trotsky and whatnot with communism, although they all didn't agree on communism versus socialism. but
Yeah.
but it was sort of like this kind of bifurcation that happened in terms of looking for other ways that weren't about necessarily having individuals amass a great amount of wealth. And yet this country that we live in was founded by people who were seeking to accrue that kind of wealth. In so many ways, they were trying to do the same thing the king that they were rebelling against was doing. So it wasn't like, I don't see it as they're looking at some kind of new paradigm so much. Whereas
To be honest,
as the Russians, and I'm not enamored with, because I traveled in the Soviet Union before its fall,
right.
and was so depressed by it. Just like,
you're also aware there's an incredible wealth class up at the top.
oh God, yes. It's the same
like
thing.
Even in a more egregious manner, I think, than
it's like what is that saying about power breeds power? And the truth about an individual's comes out in terms of their motivations, the greed factor, very, very, very strong. Yeah. So yes. Yes. But we've been, I mean, it's just kind of chunking up and looking at a bigger world view. I mean, there's China as well. There has been this struggle of sort of recognizing that capitalism is going to destroy the planet and the people. And yet, how do we address that? And how do we allow for human freedom and yet security and well-being for human community? As the two go together. It's sort of like, talk about Mars going into Capricorn. It's like the Mars Libra kind of struggle, and Mars and Capricorn is like the individual's achievements versus the society's achievements, which is the Saturn structure.
Especially when you consider Mars just came from Sagittarius, right? So it's all full of itself. It's got a big banner to wave and it's ready to do it. And then it can go in with Capricorn. And then Capricorn's this cardinal energy. It's going to be real interesting to see what happens as these.
Well, and Mars is kind of a leader, an individual, independent, aggressive, sometimes entrepreneurial leader who will look and say at this situation and say, "Ooh, let's go for it." And so there you have the Putin or the Biden or any other number of so-called leaders in this world.
Because there's opportunity.
Yes, there's opportunity. There's opportunity.
Yeah.
And who's got the cojones to actually grab the reins and say, "I'm in charge here." And this is,
I think all these really point to, a power play.
Yeah. I think that, well, that's what we're seeing with Putin and Biden right now. It's a major power play. And Yeah.
So yeah, so I would recommend for people, whatever you do, I mean, this doesn't happen just on the world playing field, this can happen in our own lives. So just realize that, people's tempers, which are already short right now, everyone feels like kind of right on the edge, give yourself some space, give yourself some time, try and interact less with people if you have the chance. Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, would really enjoy just kind of like curling up with a book.
Capricorn. It's in
Oh, right, yeah,
Capricorn.
sorry. Well, from Aquarius back into Capricorn,
Right.
it's really good time to do some research and look at things and consider things rather than being active. And with this Mars coming in with such an idealism, we can lose sight of what is important in getting what we really want over the long term goal.
Yeah, and that Mercury retrograde in Capricorn is really, really thinking about the kinds of structures that you want to live in, whether it's in your own home or in your own community or in the country. What is drawing your attention that you think, might work? And part of this whole retreat energy that we've had with COVID is very much related to the Capricorn energy. And of course, Pluto having been in Capricorn and playing a huge role. And back when this started, Jupiter was there as well. But I'm thinking of a degree that's in the last decan that these planets will be engaging in, Mercury and Pluto first, and then later on Mars will join them. There's a degree that is symbolized by someone retreating into a convent. There's this kind of reflective energy that Saturn has. I mean, that's like, looking over one's role and how you're accountable for what you're doing. So this is definitely a time to spend in reflection on what you've been engaged in, what you're trying to achieve, what do you want to promote, where do you take charge of your life, because we all have a leader in us. That's the Mars.
I love how you're stating that, because I actually think that the biggest issue facing our world today is the lack of self-responsibility. And I think the more people taking responsibility for themselves, then we have responsible communities, we have responsible societies, we have a responsible world. And Venus and Mercury in Capricorn, I'm sorry, I'm preaching to my own choir here. How can people find you, Merrylin?
moonwiseastrology.com. That's and on Moonwise Astrology, there's links to the podcast of my show and the Moon Minutes, which are podcast by ksfr.org. You can also find them through ksfr.org's website. Go to programs and podcasts and look for Moonwise.
Perfect. And you can find me at coremichael.com, coremichael.com. Thank you all for watching. Share with your friends. Please comment, hit like, subscribe. We're here. We hope you're having fun. Let us know if there's any certain topics you'd like for us to cover. Have a great day.
All right. Adios.